Hello and welcome to the Workbench. This is my little side business where I repair and install digital command control into HO scale and sometimes others, but primarily HO scale, model railroad locomotives. You can see before you my primary workspace. It is a little bit messy right now because there's a nice pile of parts here in the corner from scrapped locomotives mostly. Some electronics that I've ripped out that are either no good or they wanted something different. You know, bits and bobs and this and that, and a little bit of everything. Some projects that are also in progress. That's what this stuff here is from. Not the clip. The clip belongs back there in the pile with the rest. But yeah, so I'll give you a brief tour. This is my ESU foam cradle for putting the locomotives in to avoid breaking detail parts. I used to use, I think it's Bowser that makes them, a different foam cradle. It's a little bit different shape. I find that the ESU cradle is actually far superior to the Bowser cradle, which I do still have somewhere. It's probably in my storage room. Pardon me. The ESU cradle, if we look at it end on, you can see this nice, it's like a 90-degree angle in here, but it's reclined back to have this side be at approximately a 45-degree angle. And that allows me to lay the locomotive in here and work on it. And then I do still have this section here if I need the locomotive to be perfectly upside down. Although typically what I do for a locomotive that I need to be upside down is just put it in here upside down and work on it in this direction. This is a magnetic strip for holding screws. I get a lot of use out of this cradle, but I don't need it right this moment, so we're going to put that off to the side and out of the way. I of course have a test/programming track which is hooked up to my NCE system. This is a wireless system. It will be taken away at some point in the future to be put on my modular layout. Once I finish, pardon me, boy, stupid dry throat. Once I finish constructing the modules, there's some ESU decoders, including a couple of older V4s up the top there, and some newer V5s down at the bottom. My ESU loc programmer, the ESU decoder tester, which I have wired up really awesome. I'll show you guys that in a future video when I actually use it. Some extra hands with magnifiers. And of course, you can't do this kind of work without a soldering station. This particular one happens to be an X-Power 8786D. I also have a Yahoo 8786D. They're pretty much the same thing. The model number is the same for a reason. They are both Chinese clones of, I think it's pronounced Hako, but it might be Heiko. It's H-A-K-K-O. I believe it's a Japanese company, but anyway, it's a clone of their 8786D. When I bought this, it was only 60 bucks on eBay. They went up significantly in price after that, and now they're pretty much gone because they've been replaced by the 8786D lowercase I for improved. Actually, there's the company name right there because I'm using a real Hako iron holder. And solder sponge. I don't use a wet sponge, I use a brass. This is significantly better for your tips, and the solder balls up and falls to the bottom, so you can actually take this bottom piece off and empty the solder out. My brass sponge ball here is getting pretty worn out. It does need replaced. I have a couple more on order. Unfortunately, sometimes things take a long time to get here right now. So if you're going to do this kind of work, I really highly recommend this. This is called servo tape. This is an, I don't remember what brand this is. It's not branded on it. It's only branded on the packaging. It's primarily used for RC vehicles, hence the name servo tape. It's for mounting servos. But I use it for all sorts of things. I do have another roll of it here, which is 3M branded, has 3M all over the backing, the red backing. So, box of standard number 11 knife blades. If you do a lot of modeling work, you're going to go through a lot of those. The 3 blades next to it are older blades that have worn edges, and I'll explain my 3 knife color-coded system here shortly. Of course, I have the KD coupler height gauge. This is the plastic one, the more modern one. I used to have a metal one, but the awesome part about this plastic one, and I have several of these, is that you can just have it on the rails all the time, even when your power's on. The old metal one you could not, because it would cause a short. So what else do we have up here? Several different styrene glues. I got this for free. It's an old bottle of Bachmann. Doesn't have a brush, but really all this is the same thing as Plastrux plastic weld. It performs the same function in the same way. You do see that I keep these in medicine bottles. That is to keep them from evaporating too much. And somehow I switched those around and put the brand new one in the front. Additionally, I do have a whole thing of different micro brushes. And then there's a bunch of them back here that have wires, and they're all color-coded. Or not color-coded, but sorted, so different colors. The 2 with the blue caps are red and black. The 2 of the colors that you use the most, and right next to them are orange and gray. Those are following the NMRA DCC color guides. Here I have 3 containers full of different sizes of heat shrink tubing. This one happens to be out of the smallest size, which is the size that you use the most. However, this is the remnants of a coil. There's not a whole lot left, considering that this was, I believe, a 50-foot coil when I first bought it. So, yeah, I go through a lot of that particular size of heat shrink. I do also have some random miscellaneous pieces of leftover LED tape. The wider pieces here, there are 3 remnants, are RGB tape, and this smaller piece is just warm white yellow. This particular tape I use for making my own custom light bars inside of passenger cars. Great stuff. You do want the spacing that I have here, which is about 1 inch. If you get the longer spacings, it doesn't look quite right. You can get the closer together spacings, of course, and that will work great. So those are just extra remnants that I keep around, even though these don't really get used for model railroading. Although I do have a Christmas idea with these, where I can light up different cars in different colors. So I can have a car that's red, a car that's blue, a car that's green. Or I can hook them to an Arduino. I do have quite a fondness for this little guy. This is a... Shoot, I can't remember if this is the Beetle or the other small one that I use right now. But there's this is not the Beetle, this is the other one. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, and I don't have the package of them handy. That particular one doesn't even belong to me. It belongs to a friend that I'm doing some work for, but that's a whole other story. Gotta have all sorts of glues, so in addition to the styrene glue, I do have super glue and super glue uncure. I also have PolyZap. If you're not aware of this, and you work on models that have Delrin, get yourself a bottle from your local hobby store or order it directly from Zap. I'll read it off to you. I'm going to take it off camera for a minute. Ideal for Lexan, Delron, nylon, polycarbonate, and rubber. So Delrin handrails, anybody who's worked with them knows that they're a pain in the backside. They don't glue well. Alright, this is probably the most expensive tool on my work set of tools, actually. Set, not single tool. Most expensive piece of my kit is what I'll call it on the workbench. These are Weha screwdrivers, at least that's how I pronounce it. I believe they're made in Germany, so the W would actually be pronounced like a V. But anyway, Lots of different tips on them. I mostly use Phillips, but I do have some call for the standard, the regular flatheads. And I have them on all different sizes. This guy right here next to the black. The black is the only oddball. It is actually a pry bar. Let me pull it out of there. So it's actually a pry bar. I have not had any cause to use this yet. But the most common one I use is right next to the black, and that is a PH1. So if we focus, okay, move it away, focus. It's not going to autofocus for me. Anyway, you'll just have to take my word. It's a PH1, pretty standard Phillips head. And then the next most common that I use is the next size down from that. And if I'm doing brass, I'll use the size down from that even. Brass tends to have very, very tiny screws. So you've already seen the pile parts. This is some phosphor bronze wire, which you can use to make your own electrical pickups. In fact, this little truck here, this is a Ring Engineering one. It has a busted connection between the circuit board and one of the wheels. And the actual metal rod itself busted. So I'm probably going to replace it with some of that phosphor bronze, but we'll get to that in a little bit too. This is the bottom of an alcohol jug, and I use this for a couple things. I just cut it off when the jug was empty. You'll use a lot of isopropyl alcohol when you're doing modeling also. Typically what I do is, if I have a project that's in progress, I stash any loose parts from it in here. That's not what's in here at the moment. It's just some random screws that I found when cleaning up the workbench and haven't had time to sort yet. Plus a couple of cutoffs from light bars and a drive shaft that I don't know what it came out of at the moment. It's pretty small. Chances are something like a Bachmann 44 tonner, but I won't swear to that at the moment. Whatever it was, I didn't need the drive shaft anymore. So probably something that I completely disassembled. Cough drops and tooth flossers. I don't know why those are up here, so we'll just ignore those. The cough drops are because I constantly have problems with my throat due to allergies. These two jugs, or not jugs, but medicine bottles are empty currently. They don't have anything in them. They're just spares. Several of them here have speakers in them, and the reason that I put speakers in them is to keep them from getting metal attached to the magnet, so on and so forth, just to protect them. The two in the front here have screws. This one's just general random grab bag of screws that I've collected. This one, these are Kato screws that hold down their circuit boards from the factory. And if, for whatever reason, I'm not reusing them in the project, they go into this container because they are a unique screw, and I don't want to mix them in with my general pile. Alright, what else? So, this is just a little saw blade with a mandrel that I haven't sorted into my tools yet. That'll get taken care of. Some more random bits and bobs. Another great little thing from ESU. This is their power pickup, and you can use it as is. It's got these little wipers on the side. Let me turn the end on for you. There you go, little, I think they're copper wipers on the side to rub against the backside of your wheels, and then pre-tinned soldering pads. And you can use it as is, or you can cut the circuit board material between the two solder pads in half. There's no traces or anything going through because you wouldn't want it to short, but you can cut it in half if you need to mount it funny. So I have a couple of those. I've got a couple of real tiny micro switches that I pulled out of some units recently that I was rewiring with something else. Just some random grab bag, you know, horns and stuff. Circuit boards out of engines that I didn't end up reusing because I either put a board type decoder in the place of this or something else. I know at least one of these came out of a unit that I converted from DC-C with a 21-pin decoder to DC, and I decided that I would keep the motherboard because it wasn't really necessary, and I didn't currently have a 21-pin jumper, so I just took the motherboard out and hardwired it instead. Now, I showed you the setup there. That set is complete. I use the PH1 so much that I actually have 3 of them. So there's the one in the set, this one that stays pretty much over here normally, along with this guy. This is my common tools area. These are the tools that I use a lot, so again, we'll get to those shortly. That goes over there as well. This is a speaker enclosure that came out of a locomotive. I'm keeping the 2 screws for it with it. I might reuse it in a different project. Some couplers and coupler boxes from one of the currently in progress if I could speak, in progress projects. There we go. English. Learn it. Of course, that's an awesome tool right there. And the drill bits for it. My mind is blanking right now. I don't know why I can't come up with the name of this tool. I'm sure somebody will put it in the comments below, or I'll put it in the video description when I post this. Or even, you know, maybe do it as an overlay. And then we can pan over here a little bit. Some Soundtrax current keepers. There's 3 of them sitting there. There's also a Digitrax version. They call it something else. I forget what. Don't care. This is a motor. Ripped it out of a Bachmann that got scrapped. The motor does work though, and it actually, for a Bachmann motor, is really smooth and for the low current draw, so I kept it. Back here I got a few little pieces of fiber optic tubing and a headlight assembly out of a locomotive. Pardon me. Another used motor that still works. Couldn't tell you what it's out of. I don't remember. But I keep them around. Some circuit boards that I don't know why I kept them. They are just a bunch of diodes. And some connections on the back. These are out of the same brass unit that these micro switches came out of, but that got completely rewired in a different manner. One of my most common, especially for...
Say a command.
Ignore that. That is my GPS, which is on my desk right now. Exit. It does that sometimes. One of my most frequently used resistor values. This is 470 ohm. This will, with a 15 amp of your DC, or 15 volts of your DCC system. That's what a lot of them are set to, including mine. That gives you some extra voltage over the 12 volts that your motors are nominally designed to run at, to power your circuitry and your sound and everything. This is the most common value that I put into customer locomotives for their LED lighting. It gives them, I believe it's approximately 15 milliamps. So it reduces the brightness just a little bit, gives them a longer life, but they're still pretty doggone bright. Personally, I use 680 ohm instead, which is even a little bit dimmer, lower milliamp. The lower the current on an LED, the longer its life. LEDs, they have a nominal forward voltage. Your warm whites are around 3 to 3.5 volts. Blues and greens are a little less, and reds are much lower than that even. Overvolting LEDs isn't usually what kills them. Over current. Alright, sorry about that. My camera cut out and cut me off, and I didn't notice right away. So I was talking about LEDs and resistors, and I pointed out that it's overcurrent that usually kills them. And then of course I had panned over here and was talking about this stuff before I got interrupted. None of this stuff over here is really important. There's just some current keepers, old Digitrax decoder ripped out of something, some LEDs that I'll be using in projects, some bipolar LEDs that are negative common, which is backwards from DCC, so these can't be used in locomotives for class lights, which they're too big anyway. Little baggies. If I have to set a project aside, I put all the parts for it in a little baggie. And the little baggie is supposed to stay with the engine. This one got separated, and I don't know what engine it belongs to, so for now it's going to stay right there. I have wire in all the NMRA color codes for DCC. This just happens to be the green. I don't know why this has been left out on the workbench, other than that I forgot it. because I put them back in their packaging when I'm done with them. Alright, in my workspace here, we're going to go over just a couple more things. These guys with the silver wires are my class light LEDs. Yes, I will put working class lights in your locomotive for you. In fact, I have 5 of them for one customer that's what I'm doing with them right now. You do have to use Loc Sound if you really want operational class lights. These are 0603, I believe. LEDs. It's probably not going to focus. Yeah, it's not going to focus without me doing manual stuff, and I don't know this camera well. So there we go. We'll take it down there. It's a pretty tiny LED. This is a new camera, by the way. That's why I don't know it very well yet. It's a very tiny LED, not the smallest I use. Has 4 wires. Unfortunately, they're not color-coded. The ones that I used to use were color-coded, and now I can't find them, so I have these silver-wired ones instead. They come packaged like this with their own resistors. Those are 1K resistors. I do not use the 1K. I do use a lower value than that. And I have some more of those back there, along with the Soundtrax wiring harness for steam locomotives, which is going to go in a locomotive for my daughter once I have time to do hers. Fiber optic tubing in a couple different sizes. I actually have 4 different sizes of this, all of them from Circuitron. You may know Circuitron as the makers of the Tortoise switch machine. They also make this wonderful, well, I don't know if they make it, but they supply this wonderful fiber optic tubing, which is actually how I do my class lights. I glue them to a piece of fiber optic tubing, which then goes into the lens position. So I use it basically to make a lens, right? These here in the center, these are the smallest LED that I use. I don't know if these are the smallest LEDs currently ever made. I doubt it, but I don't know. These are 0402s in warm white. Thankfully color-coded wires, so I can easily keep track of them inside the locomotive. These are great if you're doing Athearn locomotives that had the 1.5 volt bulbs. You pull those 1.5 volt bulbs out, and then you can either use this size of fiber optic tubing to put a lens in, the same way that I do for the class lights. Or, what I have taken to doing is I just put those in to the housing and glue them in with canopy glue, and the canopy glue will dry clear and actually become a lens of its own. So I just glue these directly into the headlight housing. I don't happen to have a unit handy that I can show you on, or I would, but I'm sure I'll do one at some point on the channel. Alright, and finally we make it back all the way around the table to basically where we started with the tools that I didn't cover, that I skipped over. I have a 3 knife system that is color coded so that I can easily keep track. Green, or sometimes blue, because I couldn't find enough green handles for here, my other workspace, and my portable toolbox. So the one in the portable toolbox is the blue one right now. Green or blue is my brand new, or relatively new, very sharp blade. This is actually a brand new blade. I just put it in before making this video. Black. Black is older blades that are still in somewhat decent shape. They might have been sharpened on a whetstone at least once. This one just came out of this green knife and went into here. And the blade that was in here, because it was getting really beat up, is up there in my trash blades. So I use the green for cutting most things. But if I'm doing just repeated scribing cuts on a piece of styrene with a straight edge, I'll use the black handle and save the sharper blade. It does take a few more swipes with the blade, but I'm not wearing my blades out as fast because this blade still has plenty of life left on it. Now red, I get picked on sometimes by my friends for doing this, but red is trash blades, and they eventually end up like this one where it's got glue all over it, the tip's busted off. I don't use these for cutting. That would be dangerous. It's a good way to cut yourself. I use these as pry bars to get in under things where there's not a whole lot of room. Typically, like when I take apart an Athearn truck to get this bottom plate off, like this. This is one of those bottom plates. I use this knife blade to slot under there and pop that plate loose off of its retaining tabs. And that way I don't destroy my better quality blades. You've already seen the 2 screwdrivers. I love this pair of tweezers with the angled tip on them. I use these more than any other tweezers, which is why they stay on the workbench all the time. Here's a tool that most people are gonna find curious. Wait, that's not a tool, it's a toothpick. Toothpicks are a tool, my friend. Especially when you're using canopy glue. The way that I put these LEDs that I talked about earlier into the Athearn light housings, typically the dual beam piles, PYLE, for those who aren't familiar with them. In fact, I have, for our customer project right now, I have a casting. So that's kind of what they look like. And they're just in the nose of the locomotive. And so I take the canopy glue and I put it on something, and then I use the toothpick to pick up just a little bit of it and drip it into the hole. Okay, we're just about done here, and that's a good thing because my battery's blinking at me. So you've already heard about the servo tape, small pair of pliers, pretty common tool. And then Xuron cutters. This is their sprue cutters. This pair's a little older and worn out. I don't use them for sprues anymore. I have a brand new pair that I do that for. These are now my wire snippers. This is a track cutter that I don't use for track cutting anymore because I loaned it to somebody, and I don't know if you can see that, but they screwed the blade up by trying to cut hardened steel. So there's a bunch of nicks in the blade. There are sections of the blade that are still good. I use this for cutting plastic. Alright, that will wrap up the tour of the workbench.